Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 3 of season 7. How is everyone doing? I've got my chat windows over here. How is everyone doing? We got one person on YouTube so far, but we got some people over here on Twitch. How's it going, everybody? How's it going? Abdo, Dean, Tobias, Eric, Hamster, what's going on? Dim, hi there, hi there. No guest this week, but I should line one up soon. Definitely got to get some of the regulars like Winbush and EJ and Andy on. That would be fun. Um, but anyway, everybody should know the deal here. Start posting your questions. If you are here in the chat, you can go and post a link on Twitch if that's where you are. Or if you're on YouTube, you can type out the question if you want to. Obviously, Twitch and YouTube each have their advantages. Like YouTube, you can rewind or play back faster, or but you can't post links. On Twitch is more real time. You'll get it a little bit faster in real time, and you can post questions in there, but you cannot rewind at all on Twitch, which is a big pain in the butt. It'd be nice if it did. Let's see. What are some other things? We're working on a little plugin that's actually coming together pretty quickly. And actually, I can just throw this out as a general question to people who are hanging out here. So when we've got the first good pass of it, because it is a more simple tool, I'll probably do a demo of it live in the stream just to see people's opinions, see if there's any tweaks or anything they'd like to see. It hasn't even gone into beta yet because it's essentially such a simple tool. But it kind of goes to, well, I'll say this, it's another spline tool. And I'm trying to toy in my head, is it better to ship each of these individually and maybe with a lower price tag? So I'm thinking that this might be like a $30 plugin. So like audio is out of sync. I don't know what to do about that. Hello. So would it be better to like launch these as they go at like a lower price point, or to wait to put together like a collection, like a utility splines pack 2, and then get all of them out as a bundle? And I mean, I do think that the original ones, and I do have a giant list of potential things that could be put in that bundle. So it's something I'm toying with right now, but I'd be curious people's opinions there. There's constant things I'm kind of struggling with as far as our design concepts, because I think we make really good, thorough tools that are like very well vetted. There's almost never any bugs in our stuff, as far as I know. Like it goes to so few of our tools, we've had to go back and be like, oh, a user actually found the bug. But I'll just say this as a potential problem or a de-optimization of our style of building tools is we'll do something like make Ricochet, and we spend a ton of time working on Ricochet and putting in lots of detail and trying to think of every possible thing a user might want to use it for. And so as you combine all these different things, everything becomes, the way we say it over here is, it becomes very fractal, where it's like, oh, well, there's 4 different modes. And that means if we put a setting in, it's like, well, it might interact in those 4 modes in 4 different ways. So now we're not just adding in a feature, it's a feature that's times 4. And then you might put in a different feature where it's like, well, here's one combination of 4 modes combined with 2 options within those modes, and now that equals 8. Or maybe there's 4 times 4, and these things just multiply and get crazy. So would it be better not only for Rocket Lasso, but would it be better for an artist if instead, in the time that we made Ricochet twice as fancy, let's say, having like all these extra options, would our time have been better spent making the core functionality of Ricochet and then having released like 4 tools within that time instead? So now there's 4 times as many tools for users. The people who don't need Ricochet, they have a chance of having a different tool that would be more useful, instead of us putting in, I'm trying to think of an example in Ricochet, but like the multiple bounce modes, or the little outer shell that we can push out and push in, and all these things cost time. And actually those are, see, I like those features, but then other ones are like the weighting, where it's like, oh, you can kind of act like gravity is a little bit stronger up and down rather than left and right. And it's like, yeah, I've technically used that, but how much time do we spend on that? And how much time would that have been better spent being like, no, we don't need that feature, let's work on another different tool? Like, I don't know. These are open questions that I don't know the changes. So yeah, well, it's like Knuckles, like the question turns into like, I love Ricochet. I think it's one of our most original concepts, and I love the things it does. But just as an example, let me pull this up, because now we're just being a little philosophical about this, but I am curious in people's opinions. So here we are inside of Cinema, and I'm going to pop open Ricochet, and I kind of would love a shout out from anybody here in the chat that has opinions. If you own Ricochet and you've played with it, So here's where a lot of my questions actually come in is like, yes, okay, we've got all these core features here in the main tab. And, maybe some of these are more important than others. Like, maybe this aligned surface is really important, but we added align to normal. I barely ever use align to normal. But then it's mostly under modify. That's like, okay, yeah, surface offset and shell. Like I use those all the time. But like, here's this see normals option. I don't know if I've ever clicked this button a single time since we launched it. We can limit to a particular polygon selection. Personally, I've never used that option after we launched. And then we've got, this bevel is pretty important. I don't use it very often, but this is supposed to be, that's actually supposed to stop the lines from shooting out in space. To tell you the truth, I kind of forgot the setting was even here. Terminator object, like, yeah, that could be useful. This direction link and the multiplier field and on termination, like how often, even people who have Ricochet and like Ricochet, how often have you used bevel threshold, Terminator object, direction link, this multiplier field, and like this technical on termination, like all of these settings, even polygon selection. I feel like, where is my visualize front direction? Maybe oh yeah, okay, so yeah, I had to create a direction link, and then now we're saying like what the direction is going to be and how much force there is to like increase the gravity in a particular direction. Anyway, I would just be curious how much people use like these secondary features, and that's more the thing I'm talking about is when I start playing around, it's like, oh, what if it did this, and what if it did that, and what if it did that. So like you could layer up so many different things that it's like, oh, instead we could just build a different tool and maybe that would be better. So I don't know, just an open question. If anybody has any opinions, I would love to hear them. Let's see. While I wait to see if anybody says anything about that, we do have a typed out question and a link question. Dean's asking about a light trail network. I'm going to pop that open, make sure the tab is muted. Oh, yeah, mute tab. And yeah, I'll share my screen over there. Cool. So what do we got here? So this, well, I don't know for sure, but this looks like a real life. I mean, it could be a render. But let's see, new media, audio, visual art. So my assumption is, yes, this is yeah, it's an art installation. So this is real. Audio, visual art technology. Doesn't seem to be a lot of information. Okay, let's scroll through. Okay, so now see the projecting light here, but I'm thinking, like, is this a giant monitor that's just rotating? Well, I don't want to say just rotating, but is this a big fancy monitor and everything we're seeing here is potentially just a render on top of it? Or is this like an actual series of lasers that are being fired in real life with a little bit of mist in the room and they're reflecting off of like mirrors? I'm thinking it's probably a video playing on some sort of like LED wall, and that LED wall is rigged up on like a robot arm or something like that. And it's rotating, but I don't know that for sure. It could be many different things. And if we scroll down and look at their other work, you can see that they actually put LED strips on trees in a forest. Here's a giant LED screen, but you see there's actually a laser shooting out of it in real life, seemingly. You never know. When you look at something like this image here, it's like, well, is that a render or is that real? Like, especially when you're abstracted like this, like that certainly looks real. So I'm assuming all of these are like actual photos of the actual installation. But anyway, this media is clearly it's clearly a mix of video on a screen and also actual beams of real world light and laser beams. So with that in mind, I gotta say that this is, I'm having trouble, especially with the resolution of sound. Let me see if I can, trick this into getting a little bit larger. I'm having a little bit of trouble. So it looks like there's words, and then it looks like that's what's interesting. It looks like every point here, now I look at it, it looks like every one of these laser beams, every one of these like bright dots rather, is connecting to every single letter. But not every single letter. This one's the most prominent, obviously. And when it's running, you'll see that it's connecting a single line to each, not letter, but like each word of letters. And these could be words, it could be DNA sequences. They could be doing anything. It's an art installation. So like each word is getting a singular connection. I think for a split second I did read a word there. So I think they are real words. So then you look at all of these. But then the interesting thing here is it almost seems like the laser is getting brighter the further away the word is. And you can see, like, if you look at this lower light, that the ones that are connecting here, which they are connecting, it seems like the closer they are, the dimmer they are, is kind of what I'm seeing here. So, that's where I'm at on the basics there. So let's jump on over to the laptop. Now, let me think. We actually might have an upcoming tool. This is kind of funny, but we might have an upcoming tool that's going to, how should I even say it? We might have something unrelated that would be another way of approaching this. But right now, the only thing I think that could even begin to make those lines as we see them is ricochet. Yeah, I feel like the only thing that could do it is ricochet, which is not an intent of mine, but I'm seriously trying to think of other ways I might do it. So maybe there technically would be ways of doing it. Let me try and show like a little bit of a rig that shows the idea getting as far as I can without using our plugin. So I'm going to make a line. If you didn't know, there's a new line primitive here. It's technically a capsule. We didn't make it, but there's a new line primitive, so you can actually make a straight line very easily. And I'm going to make that straight line so that I can make a matrix object, and that matrix object will clone onto an object, and that object will be a line. And now I can set this to have a rate. And if I hit play, you'll see that all of these lines are traveling. I'll slow it down a little. So yeah, now we've got this constant wave of matrices traveling across. So now let's say that we're going to treat these matrices as the source of something. And one of those bright lights that we were just seeing, I'll just represent with a sphere. And we'll drag this over there. So now I can make a cloner, and I'll duplicate the line inside the cloner. I'll say it's facing on Z, starting from the start. And the cloner here will be cloning onto an object, and the object will be these matrix objects. So now I should have a bunch of lines, but we'll just skip right to the good part here, which is going to be, let's make a target effector, and I'll say to target the sphere. So now you can see each of these is generating a line, and that line is always aiming at the sphere. So thanks to that, now you can see we get all these lovely connections. The problem, of course, is that we're overshooting. Like these are maintaining their length the entire time, and these are really long. Now, having said that, it still looks kind of cool that, the way these kind of rotate down, we get this circle like rotation going. Like that's cool, but that's not what we're attempting to achieve here. But of course, you make all sorts of cool shapes here. So yeah, fun. But here's what I was saying is I immediately kind of get stumped is how could I stop these lines? So you see one line isn't even long enough once it gets to a certain point. This one is getting cut off, so I need them to be longer technically. So I could scale these up. But how do I stop them from being too long? How do I crop them out there? Now, technically, you could just block it out by having some sort of geometry, like blacking it out. But then it goes to like, well, okay, maybe we can scale it based on some sort of fall off. And technically, maybe there would be a way to do this, but I do think it'd be a pain. On this cloner, I'll make a on this cloner, I will make a plane effector. We will not do a position, but we will do scale uniform absolute -1. And then we're going to limit it with a spherical field. So I say spherical field, and I do not know if this is the way to do it, but I'm going to put that inside the sphere and reset my position. And then we're going to give it a full fall off and then start increasing this radius. And if I get it just right, okay, surprisingly, that did work pretty well. That was just a gut intuition I had. But essentially, what I'm saying from the point of view of this particular circle, for this particular sphere, like the closer you are, be a particular scale, and the further you are, be a different scale. And I just scaled it, and it has to scale, of course, from its position, because if I move this somewhere else, that would, not be quite right. Although, again, kind of cool looking. So, and then the other advantage here, although not perfect. And maybe, does this have any implications? If I grab the inner offset, yeah, if I start scaling this up, yeah, it's really interesting. If I scale it up all the way to a point where it's like barely touching that one, you see that that's actually not scaling things quite right. But again, looks kind of cool. So we want 0 radius on there. We get our full fall off, and these are now going. Now, we could also, what the good part about this, and something if I was using the ricochet rig, which maybe we don't even need to do now because we did find a way of doing it, is that these are getting color, which is cool, but the color is only partial. You'll see if I load in here that this one is already kind of medium gray. Let me show you. I'll load in like a rainbow, and you'll see that this one's already starting in this kind of green yellow. So that means it's already at the halfway point essentially before we get to any of these other colors. So if we wanted to colorize this entire thing, we would need to kind of scoot everything over, and this is not going to be easy, but it's like, I essentially have to scoot everything over until we start seeing actual red there, something like that. And now all of these would need to be evenly distributed over on that side in order to see that we're getting the full spectrum. Loading back, let me grab just my simple black and white, and we could just grab this, and I'm just eyeballing it, but I could move this far enough over now that I think we are getting this black to white gradient, which we could then remap relatively cleanly, and that this would enable us to do that fading. We said it was fading in and out, which we could represent via this color that we're now giving them, the individual clones. So from there, now we've kind of got this singular rig. Now, obviously, the original thing had like text traveling across, but were we linked specifically to different words in it? Maybe, I don't know. So we could just have like a line of text going across. I don't know if that's an interesting part of this rig, but one thing we do know, which I'm trying to think of, I'm highly skeptical of this, but I would be curious: is it possible to take a whole chunk of this rig and clone it multiple times? Very skeptical of that, but let's figure that out. I think I need to put everything except for the line into a null. No, there's no way this works. Target, let's put that there for organizational purposes. That's coming for the cloner. Don't show that. The matrix technically should calculate beforehand. I'm just giving Cinema an easier job of calculating from top to bottom. Actually, you can even see that this is a thing. Do you see how right now that these lines are perfectly on the matrix? But I'm not sure what I had to reorder. Yeah, you see if I move the matrix down lower, do you see how it looks like it's lagging a frame behind? That's probably only happening in the viewport, but by putting these in the proper order, Cinema is like, oh, I can calculate these better, and the lines are not disconnected anymore. Sure. I really don't think this is going to work, but let me make a cloner. Okay, actually, that's giving us some potential that maybe this will work. So here's why this might actually work, which is I'm kind of shocked, and I'm not sure that the fall offs are entirely working on these individual rigs. But the reason I thought there was a chance that this would work is this line that we're cloning along is external to our rig. So this matrix is saying, well, I have to, even though I'm inside of the rig and I'm getting copied and everything's going to reference me, I'm still referencing something outside of my rig. So here's the right way, or here's a way of demonstrating that. So if I were to take this null, copy and paste it, I'm kind of free to grab this rig and just move it. And you see, even though I'm moving this entire rig, including the matrix object and the cloner and everything, because they're all referencing this external line, I'm able to move it. So that's the reason why I thought this might be able to be put into a cloner. So since that doesn't seem to be working okay, I will make a n side, give it 124 sides, T for scale. And let's say that we're cloning around that. So I'll activate this cloner. I'll say clone onto an object. The object will be this ring. Oh yeah, and that's not pivoting from the center. Actually, it's kind of interesting. Not surprising, but if I grab the sphere, reset the transform to the dead center, now you see that they are all referencing that. And they are cloned around, though there are some on these corners, so that's a little not perfect. I'd probably just make an offset and just make sure that these are spun a little bit. Yeah, just to make sure that they are not perfectly lined up in the corners. So now you see I was able to actually clone that. Again, wasn't fully expecting to be able to do that. but I do think that it's not quite working with the colors. Or maybe the fall offs. Yeah, I guess it goes to the radius. Remember that radius was it was a variable radius of where the stuff fell off. So I think the fall off from this location would need to be larger. So I'm not quite getting the full black to white transition. A lot of these are doing a pretty good job, but these ones that are extra far away up on the top, those are not quite as far to get the full gradient, which, maybe that's fine. Yeah, but even now, I mean, I'd be having a lot of trouble getting the fade going. But yeah, there's a lot of neat things even here, like, conceptually that, it's like I'm free to grab these and move them around, make all these varied shapes. Like it's kind of a cool interwoven looking pattern that is neat. I'm trying to think of how far I want to go with this because, essentially we just answered a larger part of it that I didn't think we'd be able to. The curious thing is that that they are still successfully scaling to get the proper size here where they're not overshooting, especially considering I eyeballed that. I'm sure that's not directly on the sphere, but it's pretty dang close. And the color is the only thing not. Now, of course, we're seeing these pop into existence. And honestly, now that I see how these are just popping in and out of existence, this is probably explaining why in the animation we saw that they had them fade in from the beginning, because once they're being created, then obviously they need to you want to fade them out. You want them invisible so that they slowly fade in. So that's giving us a whole bunch of lines traveling. Now, in theory, it's like we could have done multiple rigs here. I didn't have to put this into a cloner. We could just copy and paste, or I could make this editable and get the radius working properly on this entire thing. Or the individual spherical fall offs to get the proper color on each one individually. That would not be hard. It just goes to once we make it editable, then obviously it's a lot harder to tweak the rig because you'd be tweaking it like 12 different times. So I'm trying to think of, I don't think in my NAB presentation I talked about things being able to fade in at this constant rate if you wanted them to. And I'm trying to think if that's applicable here, but I don't think it is, because this matrix object, everything's, actually these are their origin. Maybe it would work. Okay, this could be cool. Let me try something different. So currently we got this plane, which is scaling it down. I'm going to say this plane is no longer worried about color. Okay. Now all of these matrix objects are all actually traveling this line, which means they are hitting this point. They are physically appearing there. So if we make another plane effector, and I'll name this one plane dot color, and we'll name this one plane dot scale, I will move this in, and that should be getting applied. Yeah, actually, no, it's not. Is it the matrix? Actually, I'm going to say don't affect the matrix. I'll just say affect the cloner. I'm not sure if one is better than the other, but since we're already scaling from the cloner, I will put this on. Let's say don't affect position. Yes, affect the color. And now, this is shockingly simple. I was about to do something way more complicated. All I have to do is put a spherical field here. The spherical field will live outside of the rig. And if I move this over to the corner and we increase our radius, and let's shrink the inner, there you go. Simple as that. That was even simpler than I thought it would be. So, okay, so what do we do? Now we have a plane effector, and the plane effector, remember, the only thing getting sourced is this constantly traveling line in the center. That's the only thing that's changing. So that means that's absolute in the world. So we can just reference a single spherical field because that's what's getting referenced. So now this is giving us the color from there. I could delink from this, and I don't know if we want them to fade back out again, but I'm going to assume that we do. So let's say that we're going to go from black. Actually, let me do that too. So we got black, white, black, distribute not, so they'll be bright for a while, but now you see that they will be black when they first get created and fade up, and you see they also fade out at the end. We could add in some random variation on there. There's a lot of things we could modify in there, but now you'll see these are transitioning quite nicely. I will make a background disk shape here just to kind of like eyeball the illusion for us. If I say, yeah, if I just change this object's color to be black, then now essentially you'll see them fading in and out just because of the optical illusion. So they're not actually getting transparent. They're just fading from black to white. But now you see they don't look like they're popping in anymore because they're fading in. So we could hide the original line. We could visually hide that matrix object. And now we just have these laser lines traveling around. But what's cool, I mean, first of all, I'm going to save this because I'm very, very happy that we were able to tackle this and make it working quite as well as we are, because I think it looks pretty cool. Or yeah, and it goes to, it's a very elegant rig, if I can use that word. I'm going to say cloning, cloner, laser light. Okay, so that's looking cool. We could grab this one. I'll even name this one spherical color, so I know that that's what's being driven there. We could grab these and set these to any color that we like. So let's go, let's make it yellow. I'm always go to the blue, so let's make it kind of orangey and yellow this time. So yeah, now we get these colors fading through. Let's hide this outer line. We'll set this, that sphere. We'll just, I'm trying to mimic our original reference a little bit, so I'll make those kind of bright white. We can make those more glowy if we want to, but yeah, now those are traveling through. Now, we do have a lot of control over this stuff. First of all, these are all uniform. So back into our original matrix object, I gave it a rate. I could just click this button and say go faster. We could click it and say go slower. But the best is I can just grab this rate variation and increase this. And now you can see that all of these lines are traveling at different speeds. So now we have some fast ones and some slow ones. And because the entire thing is based on this fall off, it doesn't matter. It's just going to perfectly transition. We already talked about how we're not locked into a particular location. So we could grab the original source shape here, and I can pull this over, and you can see that this becomes more three-dimensional. Definitely a little trippier. There'll be a little more depth that we could do from there. Looks really cool from a ton of angles. So dig that. And then, so the next thing we could do is these are not locked into position either. So if I were to grab these are the clones. They're aiming at the target. The target sphere is getting cloned by this cloner. So this cloner is the one I want. So these are currently static, and I offset them myself manually. But if we give that a rate, now these ones on the outside can be traveling around doing their thing. We could grab rate variation on that. And now all of these outer ones are each traveling at their own speed, moving, doing their own thing. The rig continues to work. So yeah, super digging that. Always still traveling along this original line. That original line potentially could be getting modified heavily. So let me grab this original line. We could make it longer, but I'm just going to throw an electric spline modifier in there. So everybody who's in the newest version of Cinema, if you click on your deformers menu, you'll find the Rocket Lasso electric spline modifier. And we can drop that on this line. And let me make it visible. So now you can see we've actually got this electrical distortion on there. And in theory, the cloner that's traveling along that, the matrix object that's on that, is now trying to travel up and down this line. So let's add some more extra variation on here. I'm going to have it not fade out. And then here's something that's cool is right now, this is like a three-dimensional electrical zap happening. Watch this. If I say relative scale, I could say relative scale XYZ 0. And now you see it becomes perfectly flat. And now it's traveling only up and down, left and right. But now I can say X is also 0. So now these lines are only traveling up and down. It's become two-dimensional. So that's pretty cool. Now we've got our FBM. I'm going to say 0.5, or do we need to go larger? 5. Okay, now that makes it smaller. I'm going to change this to maybe a Perlin noise. So now you see I get these wiggly lines like that. And we could change the speed. We could change the way they're distorting. I can grab this displacement and push it up higher. Let's grab our noise scale, our resolution here, and I'm going to lower this down here. So now we get this constantly oscillating frequency. I could hide that. And now you see all of them are feeling like they're traveling to left, but they're oscillating up and down because that's the line that they're traveling on. Let's see. I'm not sure how well this will work, but let's make another electric. Well, essentially, we've tackled a lot of what I thought was the cool technical parts of that. And now we're just exploring it and trying to make it our own, which for especially people who are newer to the industry, Like the important thing, this is so important because I've made a lot of tutorials in my time. Lots of people watch tutorials for all sorts of reasons. But if you're going to make something from a tutorial, that's cool. But if in any way you're going to show this off to other people, if you're putting on your demo reel, make it your own. Like I would not have to make that many changes to this until it would be impossible for somebody to be like, oh, that must be inspired by this other thing, because it's going to start looking like it's a mix of a bunch of other things as well. So definitely always make things your own. So now you can see I'm switching all these to be electrical looking. Now all these bits of electricity are going to be identical because they're all getting cloned the same. But there would be ways of us avoiding that if we want to. I could, increase, if I make these, if I scale them up, we'll start seeing the uniformity a little bit more. But again, looking kind of cool there. All of them cloning and doing that. I'm going to actually turn off this one because I think them traveling, giving it that uniformity, I think actually is kind of nice. And do I want to have them spin uniformly? Maybe. I'm going to slow that down. And, ooh, that starts getting real trippy there. But right now, you see that these all look identical because we only have one electric spline modifier. It's getting cloned a bunch of times. But if I want to, I could make a couple of copies of that. Let's just make 4 copies of that line. And I'll just grab the, okay, cool. I can grab these and then grab seed, and I'll just type in num. And now each one's getting its own unique seed. So now there's at least 4 different ones. And now it's a lot harder to see the pattern in the electricity by only making 4 copies of that line. Now there's other ways we could blend this, but I bet if we blend it, it would be a lot slower. So that's why I'm not doing that. Again, this is all mostly, you see all of that electrical effect is making it look a little bit messy. Let's pull back on that. Actually, just a little bit goes a long way. And yeah, even now I can't really, if I look in any given location, I can't see the pattern right now, even though it's repeating every 4. Let's see. I'm going to feed in some more colors on here just because I think it would look cool. So let's grab our color one. Let me load in one of my custom neon presets. So I'll grab this neon rainbow here. And then I'm just going to sneak in an extra dot to go to black, an extra one there to go to black. Right click, distribute. Oops. What did I do? I don't know. Distribute nuts. And now, we're still fading in, but now we get these cool neon colors on there. Traveling around, and just look at how many different things, like how controllable this rig is. I can grab right now you see each one of these is casting out 10 lasers essentially. I'm going to drop it down to 5. So now there's a lot fewer. We get to make it even just 1. Now look, just a single pulse is traveling through. So like that looks cool, but we can also say, okay, well, give me twice as many as we had before. And at a certain point, we'll probably start seeing patterns and it will start slowing down. But each of these completely different look. So I'll put this down to something like 5. And now we can grab this overall cloner, which is cloning the entire rig. And I will say clone rig. And we can say how many are here. So we can drop that down to 4 and we just get a couple. And look at the completely different look that we have here. Now, almost look like a spinning like diamond shape. But we can take that and also increase it. So now there's a lot more lines traveling around the perimeter, but each one is still traveling across. We've got all that speed variation going. So we could say, get rid of that speed variation. And now we're back to, I think they get trippier when there's a little more uniformity on them. And then let's grab our electric lines. And I'm just showing you stylistically. We're just having fun here, playing around, making things look different. That's an FBM noise, but let's change it to a Perlin noise, which always look more uniform. Oh, look at that. I really like the way that looks. I'm going to save this as another version of the file, just in case somebody wants to do the earlier one and the newer one. This should be available on Patreon. In fact, I'm trying. It's not easy. It's quite hard to do, but I'm trying to get the scene files posted the same day. So like within 2 hours of the stream ending, these scene files should be available on Patreon to people supporting at the engineer level, for people who like reverse engineering things like I do. So those are traveling across, doing their thing. We could make those lines longer. I'm just playing here. This will probably mess up the fading, and actually it probably might break, but I could make these wider. And now you see, look, now they're traveling from this outside, traveling all the way to the other one. I just have to scale this field up until it's kind of showing us the full range. Oh yeah, and I have to move it over. So we do that and scale that up enough. So now we're fading in, but now we're fading in on this crazy spinning diamondy shape. I don't know. It's just crazy combinations here. I'm trying to think of other wacky places we can go here. And also keep in mind that all of this is just using all the amazing cloner stuff. These are all just stuff in basic MoGraph. So we can layer up like additional things on top of that, where I could be using the rocket lasso modifiers. We could be putting these spring. There's the delay set to spring mode, where these could be kind of springing around and moving more organically. We can grab these matrices, and I guess this would be pretty similar. But I can grab the matrix and then feed it a random, and now the random is having them travel each in a slightly more unique path. Let's crank up this. Oop, well, if I go too far, they're going to. Oh man, look at that! Like that's cool and crazy. Now this is in 3 dimensions. So, and I don't think there's much of a reason to not to be 3 dimensional given this rig. So I'd probably say X, Y, Z. Just do 0 on Z. And honestly, here even Y is the one that's relevant. So we can just do Y. So they're traveling at different heights, even though they're constantly still traveling along that original spline. And again, we just click on this matrix and say, "Oh, I want more of those." I think the interface glitched. Where's where's my controls in the matrix object? Yeah, look, they suddenly appeared. That was weird. Maybe it's because that's a capsule. Like it could, there's reasons that it might like get more confused, or it's likely to be buggier. But anyway, I was just gonna say, well, if we crank up this number, I'm gonna go too far here. But yeah, here's like a ton of them. Anyway, I could keep on exploring this and playing around and making it more our own. Do we feel like we sort of tackled the core of the question? And do we want to move on to a different question? It's pretty cool. And yeah, giving this depth and like setting this up for a proper render. I mean, I guess let's just spend a second and set this up to be kind of a glowy render just because we're so close to it already. I think it's as simple as grabbing these final lines, adding a render tag, add a redshift object and tell it to render as hair strands. And then we'll make a material. Uh-oh. I think I might have crashed. Hopefully it's not so. Actually, yeah, if I crash, it doesn't affect streams anymore. But I think I did just crash cinema. Something about putting, we are doing something crazy here where we are cloning a cloner of lines which are capsule based, which are getting deformed by a capsule, and we put redshift tags on there while it was playing. So that's a rough combination of things to throw at cinema, but I think that we did kill it. So let me just jump on over here and open my task manager, force cinema to quit, end task. Oh yeah, and the reason I just cut to me is I was pretty sure that I had like web windows on the open there, and I did have my emails open. So relaunching cinema, and it's relaunching. Shouldn't be take too long. Okay, it's open again. Jump on back. Boop. Okay, so yeah, but the best part is even if I freeze the computer streaming or doing Cinema 4D stuff, I'm piping it through an external video card into a different computer, which is doing the streaming. So it's a lot more of a stable setup than we've had in the past. Because we crashed, yeah, it's going to have lost. Oh, actually, I just opened the wrong copy of Cinema. So I'll close that and open this one. I have the 0.1 update, but I just haven't like relinked everything to it and whatnot. So we're running in the 0.2. Okay, so did it remember the file? It didn't remember the last one because we crashed. So open up B. We probably lost a little bit, but not much. Okay, it's starting to tell we lost nothing. Should we? I'm going to, maybe we just immediately crash again, but I'm going to try and put redshift on there again. I'm going to try and put this redshift tag. Well, that should be fine. And then I set these 2 hair strands, and then that's when it didn't like it. So anyway, that should be fine. I guess before we reactivate those, we can just... actually, I probably just have to reactivate them. So I guess if it crashes, there's no helping it anyway. So I will activate those. So it is successfully doing that part of it. And if I clone the entire rig, it's fine. So yeah, go figure. Don't know why I didn't like it. So I will give that a save and then open up Redshift, and let's open up our render view. Hey, all, we're getting a decent crowd hanging out today. Welcome, welcome, everybody. So here you see that these lines are already rendering, and they're already rendering with their colors, which is cool. Thank you, Redshift. But let's open up a material. And I'll just apply this to the cloner. And now you see they all turn white, but they're also shiny, which is kind of cool. But inside this material, we need to double click, type in user, color user data, load in the MoGraph color. I'm going to pipe that through. Actually, I'm going to turn off color, turn off reflection, turn on emission. And I'm going to go crazy and set this up to like 15. Let's expose our parameter. And actually, I want to expose the color, not that parameter. Boop. And yeah, now we're getting the color and it's super duper bright. So you see those are all really blown out. But now that they're over bright, we can go and add in a redshift post effects, turn on bloom. And as we lower the threshold here, they're going to start glowing for us. So we can lower that down. You see, we start getting this nice bright glow. We could do things like flares or streaks. If we lower this down, we're going to get some, you can just start getting all these crazy effects. That's very kind of neon. I'm kind of digging that. See if we push it too far. I don't dislike it. So I guess I'll just leave that there. Flare, yeah, this is not going to be good for flare, but I'm just curious what it does. I'll lower that down. Yeah, you just get this crazy bright flare. So I almost never ever use that. And then if you probably do know this, but if you make a redshift camera, you link to the camera, there's a really cool section called optical. And there's a bunch of really powerful settings inside of optical and color correction. So we can do things like affect the overall exposure. So we can just say, okay, everything should be brighter or not as bright by how the exposure is. You can recolorize your entire scene using the white point. This isn't a great one for it, but we can add some vignetting so it fades out on the edges. We can do some depth of field, of course, but this is entirely flat. Although I think it could look pretty cool in 3D. But anyway, what I was going to do is go into color correction and turn on tone mapping. And this is a really good way of getting like bright glows, but not letting them go too far, where we can say, what is the threshold for where these black colors start getting cut off. And as I increase this, you can see that we can still get this bright glow, but now it's not blowing out quite so much by increasing this. We could play with the saturation, get more color, get less color. And all this is just coming from the camera in this case. So lots of fun modifications you do there. And this is why most of my renders, I don't do any sort of modification in After Effects, because I'll just take the raw render. But, if I was better at After Effects and the better like compositor and whatnot, then I would definitely, want to do some of that. But anyway, you can see we get this really cool layout. Got some nice glows going here. I don't think the spheres are adding much to what we're seeing. So I'm just going to say don't render these spheres. And now we just get this cool abstract shape. And yeah, you saw all the different ways that we can layer this together. Different effects. Let's reset this to be a FBM. And now you see that they are all electrical looking. So lots of cool, different crazy looks. I'll give that a save now that we do have that set up with the redshift ready to render. And again, if we hit play, we'll get them traveling in all these cool, wacky ways. So I dig it. I dig it. Good question. Thank you so much. I really like those where it's like kind of like a question that's, we spend some time, we analyze what we saw, and then we really try and break it down and think about exactly what is going on. And then we're able to go and make it our own. F85, I don't know if that's like Octane's cutoff feature. Maybe somebody else in the chat can say, all that stuff I was doing with the camera with this optical tone mapping and like cropping off these thresholds, is that like Redshift's cutoff feature? Somebody in the chat might know. Just check in. Yeah, Dean, that's why I wanted to point that out, is for the longest time, I didn't know that this color correction stuff was in the Redshift camera. And yeah, they are quite powerful. You can even load in like a LUT directly from there. And you can do these additional color controls. These are things that we have access in like the render settings, but these optical ones, this tone mapping, is not available in the Redshift render settings, only on the camera. Tobias, you are completely right. We could use a redshift ramp and colorize these along the length of the spline as well. And those could even be like overlapping on top of them so that, it's like, they could start really bright and fade off as they get near the middle. A million, different ways of combining that. But that would be pretty cool. Phil's saying that it would be cool if that inner line of the matrix was also circle, which I agree, that would be potentially cool. So let's check, let's see if that does anything. So pretty much I'm just going to grab this end side, duplicate it, and I want to see it. So now I'm going to clone onto that instead, and I think that is just this matrix. So if I say that matrix should clone onto this other end side instead of this one, now these are going to be traveling in a circle. So now I can hide that end side, and yeah, now completely different motion going here. And now we got one thing traveling one direction. So let's tell this matrix to actually be traveling negative direction. And now we want that to go pretty slow. So those will slowly travel the other way. Let's grab this one and say, I guess that's a larger sphere, so they're going faster. So I'll lower that down. So everything's moving relatively slow. And now, yeah, however we want to modify that shape. So these could be traveling outward. Our color fade out is going to be fighting us if I scale things too much. But yeah, these can be any scale here. Push those out further, and you can see all these other crazy, wacky shapes we might be able to get just by moving these things. Oh, that looks super weird. I'm starting to mess with the scale a little bit, but yep, it works. Cool. Cool, excellent. It's no one. Yeah, you could definitely catch this from the beginning when I do the replay, which again, I'm going to post on Patreon immediately. So within 2 hours when I'm done, it should be posted on Patreon. And I'm having it be available on Patreon for 1 week exclusive on Patreon. And then after that, it'll be public for the replay. Scrolling. Yes, it is. Okay, Paul says that yes, it is like the Octane cutoff feature. TJ, thank you. Okay, so Demi has a question over here on YouTube. So yeah, we're gonna start a new one. Is there a way to create a vector field force where whatever field you create, the vectors point around the field instead of inwards and outwards with Boolean operations with other fields? Is there a way to create a vector field where whatever field you create, the vectors point around the field instead of inwards, outwards? Oh, with Boolean operations with other fields. I don't even know if it's possible to do that with. I don't even know if that's possible to do with fields per se, but maybe we can. But I think I understand the question. There's just one big problem with it, and that is it's a very specific formula to do this, and I don't know if I'll remember that specific formula, but let's see if we can figure it out. So I'll step everybody through here step by step. What is the easiest way of, I think we can tell just from the vector field. So we're going to we'll start out with a sphere. We will plot this into a volume builder, and we will set it to be vector. And now you're going to see we get these lines. So yeah, I think this might have been just immediately the question you were asking, because right now you see these look like they're aiming in and outward. So what is the equation? The equation is we are going to make a random field. We're going to drop this inside. And now we get these different types of overlay. I'm going to say that this random field is based on the objects below. And now you see that we've got those same angles, but these are all, they're totally random, just existing in the position that the other ones were. And now we're going to set this to cross product. And is that all that we have to do? It might be. Inner range, outer range. So I'm making those thinner. And maybe you do. I'm tinkering with a couple things here. Perfect primitive. Interesting. Yeah, these are just how these are laying out. But you now see that we get these vectors. If I grab our random field and I start scaling this up, eventually you're going to start seeing some lovely swirly uniformity. Now, I'm assuming this is what you meant, that these are now traveling around the shape. They're aligned with the shape instead of random. Now, a couple things to note. First of all, the resolution of the sphere might be relevant, so I'm going to increase that. And okay, it didn't change too much. So right now, I did this via a random field. So this random is giving random vectors, and now essentially the magical part there is that we have to take the random field and do the cross product of that angle. So essentially, it's like that's saying that the arrows of the sphere, which are pointing outward, that's the axis that we're spinning around, and then this random is attempting to spin around that axis closest to the angle it would have been not on it. It's kind of hard to describe. I'm trying to think of a way of visualizing it. So just as a point of visualization for anybody who's curious, we can think of each of those vectors that were coming off of the sphere as like this arrow pointing upward. And then we're putting in a second one. So I'll just copy and paste. So now you can think that the random one's coming in and it's at some arbitrary angle. So it's coming in, it's like, oh, that's the particular random orientation that the random field is telling us. So once we do the cross product, then suddenly this is going to be like, well, I have to act. Let's see, I want to even do this step by step. Let's reset this. And I'm going to drop it as a child of the first one. I'm going to say, this is now coming in, and the normal is saying, it's saying like, okay, I have to be perfectly perpendicular. We have to be perfectly perpendicular to that normal direction. So you see, we're essentially rotated 90 degrees, and then it says, okay, and now spin. Okay, I put that as a child of the wrong one. Now spin the axis. So and it can only spin like this. So now think of it like a compass. That's what that's doing. And it's going to say spin as close as you can to the random reference. So I just eyeballed it. But you can see now that those look like they're pretty dang aligned. But now this is perfect. This would now be perfectly lined up with the surface of this sphere. So now you have this random angle as snapped as perfectly as it can be to be parallel to the sphere, but still maintain its direction. That is what's happening over and over and over again on the entire surface here at every single point that it can reference. So that is the basics of that setup. Now, the extended part of the question is a couple fold. Well, first of all, we can use this as a field force if we want to. It's actually going to give us direction so that particles could flow around in this field, which we should probably do. So I will make I'll go to my particles layout. I will make a mesh emitter, and the mesh will be the sphere. It's going to clone, it's going to make them on the surface as a shot. It's going to make 1,000 particles. It's going to not have it's going to live forever and a speed of 0. So it's going to make particles. So if I play, it should hopefully initialize. Yep, big old initialize, but now you can see we got all these little particles hanging out there. Can't really see them. We don't really need to see them. Let's hide this. And now I'm going to make a field force, which I shouldn't have here, field force. And I'll set this up to 55. And let's drop in our volume as a volume object. I think that works. And yeah, you can see these little tick marks indicating that this is working. So if I crank this up, you can see that, yes, it is now taking on the directions as told to it from the volume builder. So we can turn off that display. These are all sorts of like interpolations between those points. We could do like a linear one to blend them. So now these should, in theory, you'll see these start moving. Although, well, yeah, they're going to start moving, but they're immediately going to start moving away from the surface, I think. So we have to tell it to also be attracted to the surface. So there's a bunch of layers to this. Particle group, tracer, from end 22. So in theory, yeah, this is going to create these little sneaky tails on there. And we need more frames. And now we also have to say field force, look at the original sphere, and not the points, but the surface, I think. Increase the radius. Let's see, what's that going to do? Half are pulling in, half are pulling out. So we take the sphere direction and say invert direction. No, now they're traveling the opposite way. How do I get those to travel in or want to stick on the surface? I know we want some friction. I will just make that friction right now. Friction. I don't know how strong we want the friction. Right now, these aren't not being affected by the volume at all. What I want them to do is want to hang out near the surface. But right now, I feel like they're just getting flung away. I thought it would either have to be. Oh, the volume builder is coming later. Okay, sorry. Let me do that. Yeah, those are pushing in and out. But if I invert, okay, cool. Now, okay, that did work. Now you see how these are jittering back and forth? They're constantly being attracted to the surface of the sphere. So now I say volume builder, and I will add the effect of that. So now it wants to swirl around, but this is also, look at these little oscillating snakes going around. It's kind of fun. So now we increase our overall strength, make those 10 times stronger. And I think we will make that attractor way slower. Maybe. I feel like I'm slightly missing something. But now, anyway, you can see that now we're getting almost like this weather pattern traveling along. And this is the main reason to do this type of thing, is to be able to get these particles to flow along the surface here. And actually, it would be a much nicer effect, I think, if we go to our mesh emitter and we'll set this to be constantly emitting 100 particles. Okay, constantly emitting 1,000 particles. But they will now live for a limited, I don't know, 90 frames. So now they're going to be constantly appearing, traveling around. But in addition to traveling around, they will be fading out. So it's constantly like repopulating the entire surface. So we're constantly getting like all these cool effects on there. Field force. How far can I push that? The friction is probably pretty high. So I'm going to go easy on the friction. Put that back down a bit. I wonder if I could clip that to the outside. But anyway, I'm just doing this from memory. But that's working pretty well. We get all these weather patterns. We are able to grab our. I could grab the original field, actually the original volume, which is also being fed this random field. Keep in mind, and we could do things like animate that random field. So now the noise pattern is going to be constantly evolving here. So they do want to do that flow, but they said it's like the weather patterns. The wind direction is constantly shifting somewhere new, but we're still constantly stuck on the surface of the sphere. Now, going back to the original question, it was kind of like, well, okay, now we've got these running parallel to it. Could we do multiple shapes? And keep in mind, this all has to happen within the context of the volume builder. So my hope is this is as simple as making a second shape here. And as long as we put these in the proper order, if I move this down, then yeah, we can just layer up multiple shapes inside of it. And, each one is going to be like added together. And, in theory, even this stuff can be blended. So like if we put those there, I know that there is a vector smooth. So we could say vector smooth here, and you'll see it'll actually take the end result, and it's going to smooth these out a little bit. You see they're a little chaotic, but even with the noise, I can say, well, start blending them a little smoother here. So that can be cool. And now, that should be updating. And now we've got both of these able to have stuff travel around. So we just have to keep adding stuff to the volume builder. And keep in mind, if we wanted the particles to emit, we'd also need the emitter to be viewing multiple objects from there. Potentially, you could put a single connect object, so you don't have to keep relinking multiple things. You just keep feeding things into the effector there. But now that we do have one that's emitting, one that's not, I'm curious if they will get pulled into the orbit of the other one as well. That is strange. Oh, that's not strange. We are only feeding it the gravity of one of them. So yeah, the connect object would go a long way there. Anyway, well, it's a cool looking effect where these are getting twisted. But yeah, you see they would be traveling from one to the other. But this is happening because we would just need I'm gonna actually just duplicate that, replace it by the other sphere, so we get the same settings. And yeah, and they're both layered up. So if we just say add, oh, interesting. they're getting the forces from both of them interacting. So they're both getting sucked to the place where they overlap each other because it's probably got the strongest attraction overall. So bizarre, but again, kind of cool looking. Yeah, that seems to have answered Demi's question. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up there. I'm going to delete one sphere to simplify that and see if we're back to this kind of working. Get rid of the vector smooth. Yeah, okay, so that's back to, and let me not animate that. I think this was the best state of it right here. So I'll save the scene file here for people on Patreon. Vector direction field force. Yuan visuals. Oh, having a lot of fun with Voxel plugin. Thank you. Is there a way to create interpolation for voxels like anti-aliasing? So instead of voxels appearing and disappearing as the geometry moves, they shrink to nothing instead of disappearing instantly. Not in the Voxel Mesher directly. I don't think in the Voxel Mesher directly. My brain's not just making the connection right now. I think we'll have to set it to cloner mode, but I am curious. I'm going to make a sphere, and we're going to feed this into a Rocket Lasso Voxel Mesher and create a volume builder. So now we got that. So if we were to make sure that it's decently inflated, and I'm going to make sure that the voxel range here, voxel range twirl down is, I say 5 by 5. So it's actually calculating there's a lot of thickness here. A good way of showing this, I'll set this to polygon mode. And now you can see that like there's a lot of like thickness that can be calculated here. Actually, a better way of showing that, I can go back to cube mode. If I double click the icon, you see we get this visualization. You see we've actually got this large range, and a bunch of these should be getting created. At least that's the hope. So if a bunch of them are being created, inside the voxel mesher itself, we have something called the scale field. If I activate that, and now if I drop the sphere itself in, I've never done this before. If we drop the sphere itself in, and this is from points, I'm going to say do it from the surface, and we increase the radius of the surface enough. I guess we want just enough here. Yeah, something like that. And then I might make a curve to ramp this. So maybe we'll say that they look a little bit smaller on the outside, but then I definitely want to have these ones on the inside. I can pull this up until we can kind of more blatantly see it. So if I do that, you can see that those look like they're getting like nice and kind of connected to each other. So yeah, I'm just using our own scale. I know I'm feeding the model into itself. I might not have needed to inflate that as far as I did, but we did. So now I should be able to take this, and yeah, as I pass it through, you can see that they are actually sort of scaling into the position. And this is all directly inside of the voxel mesher itself. Now, I do feel like, yeah, so that's working pretty well. And I'll save that immediately because it's a novel use case. I never thought of that. The RKT Voxel Mesher. And then we'll say, oh, come on. I think I need a new mouse. This mouse keeps on voxel fade. This mouse keeps on like letting, if I click and hold, it keeps letting go. But it's just like one of those. Actually, no, this is I was gonna say it's a cheap Amazon mouse, but this is one of my Razer mice. Okay, so that's all good. We did all that. I'm going to go back into the voxel mesh and try something different. I'm going to delete those out, go back, turn off the scale field, and now I'm going to convert this to, actually I'm going to convert, I'm going to, while in cube mode, very important, while in cube mode, I'm going to click convert to cloner, but I'm going to hold down the Alt key. So the alternative functionality of that. And instead of it returning cubes, you see it's now returning spheres. The reason I did spheres is now we can kind of see how many we can see inside, which is actually quite a few. So it is showing that maybe this volume is going too far. I didn't need to go that far. So I'll say like 2 by 2. And now you can see that, yes, we are getting several spheres here, but you can see that the inside is hollow if I go inside. And that is all thanks to this volume builder. So we can make that as far in or out as we want. And we just don't want to generate more than we have to. So now that we've done that, you can see that these are actually existing as a cloner, cloning onto this point cloud. But now we can essentially do the exact same thing, but more controllable in the world of MoGraph now, which also should calculate faster, honestly, because now we're just generating a complicated point cloud. And then MoGraph, which is super duper duper optimized, can do all the math of the scaling. So I will now feed in a plane effector, not position, yes, scale. I feel like you tell me, chat. I feel like 90% of the time I'm using a plane effector, it's just because I'm turning off plane or turning off position, activating scale, and setting it to uniform absolute -1. Anyway, now we can go to the field list, drop in the sphere just like drop in this sphere just like we did before. And now we also get colors with it, which is kind of a bonus. So yeah, now these are fading out just based on the surface of the sphere. And I want to make sure I'm getting the maximum range, which seems to be right around there. And yeah, I'll do the exact same thing. I can go to a curve and remap that curve. And I do kind of feel like it might be back. Yeah, this one's backwards from the way it was before. So I can scale these in. Interestingly, I feel like, yeah, I guess these are kind of on the kitty corner. So actually, no, those look closer. That's, oh, that makes sense. Okay, this is interesting. So I was going to say, why does this look so odd? Why does it look like it's big, gets smaller, and then gets bigger as it goes further out again? But that makes sense because the voxels are traveling inside and outside of the original shape. So half are further in and half are further out. So I think if we go back to our volume builder and I say, don't have any interior range, I'm going to say 0, but now start adding in additional outer layers to it. So we're kind of inflating from the original sphere. And now you can see that the inside ones, the further in, the smaller they look, and the further out, the larger they look, which of course is the opposite of what we want. So that's as simple as, let's see, if we go to remapping, I can say invert, and there, yeah, now I'm inverting the way the sphere is being calculated. And now these are now scaling to the outside. Now my curve remap is going to give us more control here, so I can make them even tinier there. And we can make sure that the big ones are definitely a little bit more full-sized there. And what's even better is inside the sphere, we could say, give me a color remap. And actually, that's doing a pretty good job of showing us that these ones on the inside aren't, actually, these didn't get remapped. So I might need to remap it from this. Actually, I'm just not going to worry about it. But you can see we can also colorize this. So I could say color remap, use gradient, load gradient, throw in a rainbow. And these were going to get, pass through a rainbow. But I don't know that we'd actually want to be coloring these. So now this goes back to, yeah, here's just our original sphere and it's being fed through the entire system. So now I should be free to pass this through. And yeah, now look, like how super clean these are as I move this through the cloud where they appear and disappear. If I had thought of this, I would have put this in the demo reel or shown this off as like a tutorial effect, because this is actually a really cool like effect. And you see it's running nice and fast. And like, yeah, the way those spheres are scaling in looks really cool. That's really drippy. I like it. Passing through the cloud, having that fall off. Now that's just having a sphere in there. I'll save this as the next version, which I do think is superior. And let's delete that out, and we'll make a cube, which is set to 10 by 10 by 10. And we'll swap that in. Oh, I deleted the wrong sphere. Copy, undo, delete that sphere, paste it in. And now we're swapping those out for cubes. And yep, there you go. Exact same effect, but on the original cube visual. Look how smooth that looks. Even though they're voxels, like it's like just like fading in so cleanly. I dig it. I dig it. I dig it. Cube, voxel. Taking a bite out of that. Keep in mind that, again, any shape that we feed in, we'd have to also feed into that scaling effect. So again, let me just show you what I was talking about. You see, like I wanted to add a cube in. So it's like, oh, we'll have a cube and a sphere. And right now the volume is set to some sort of subtract. So it's actually taking a bite out of it. But what I'm going to do instead is say, actually, I'll delete that out. We have the sphere. I'll feed the sphere into a connect object, and it does not need to weld. I'll just make sure my builder is still doing the same thing, which it does seem to be, which is fine. And then I'll move into my plane effector and then replace that sphere with the connect object. and you should see nothing changes. It looks exactly the same. I can grab the sphere and move it around and nothing has changed. But what has changed for us is I can add additional models in now, and you'll see that actually that's still subtractive from there. Oh, that was weird. As soon as I clicked it, refreshed, and it popped in the way it should. So go figure. Um, but now this, because it's in the connect object and the connect object is what is fed in and the connect object is what is fed in, I am free to grab these objects individually or, and move them, or just plop in more objects inside the connect object. And I don't have to constantly relink everything because Cinema's treating these as if they are one mesh now. So yeah, there they are combined, looking cool. And yeah, super easy to add additional models in there. I'll save that as another version. Why not? Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Yuan, for the question and for the idea. Some a little inspiration for Voxel Mesher that I had never specifically tried before, and it runs super smooth, which I'm happy about. Tobias, thank you as always for linking. I'll copy this to both. You can join if you want to continue these conversations, these types of conversations. You want to share links and show off work and see what other people are doing, help answer questions for people, and just kind of hang out with this community. We do have a Rocket Lasso Slack channel that you can join completely for free. And Tobias already posted it there in YouTube. I post it here in, oops, I am using the wrong keyboard. Copy and paste. You can head on over to rocketlasso.com and click on that community button and you will get a invite on how to get to the Slack. Actually, here's a little fun something. There are more questions. We will answer those, but I'm going to jump to the desktop here and let's pop open a window and increase that. And I'm going to head on over. If you haven't done it, you can head on over to the new rocketlasso.com. I spent quite a bit of time updating the website. So I built this again from scratch. I just used Squarespace. But everything should run a little quicker. It's all a little more streamlined. Making sure to actually link and keep our products up to date. The problem with the old website was very custom and it was very difficult to update, where now I can just casually pop in and update. So you can see I can very easily add in all the Rocket Lasso plugins, get all the direct links to go check them out. And then you can see the What's New series and live streams and half res, contact us. We've got our shop. You can head on over to shop and see all the plugins directly. You can head on over to I'm not even sure what's on the about page. Oh yes, I copy and pasted this from the old one. And then contact, and then communities, the thing I just linked to. So you can head on over here and then join the Slack channel. And you can also follow the newsletter. If you don't have the newsletter, you should do that. Support on Patreon. I added this buy Rocket Lasso a coffee. And then, of course, our tech support page, which you can click on all the FAQs. And if you have a problem with the plugin, you can reach out to us here. Anyway, I completely rebuilt the website in order to hopefully make it easier for people. Boom. Okay. Actually, let's see. We got World Zero has got a link. And I'll switch the screen in a second. I always do some double checks here to make sure we're not getting shenanigans. Oh, okay. Desktop. Oop. Okay. So, it's these little Lego walkers, doing all of these, different walking animations. Obviously, there's a ton of different variations on here. Actually, I do follow this. This is a particular YouTube channel, and I do follow this channel. This just seems to be somebody else, freebooted their content, where they pseudo stole the content and put it online without, as far as I can tell, without attribution. But anyway, the point being is we got all these little walkers. And we could experiment with trying to make one of them. It's not, these mechanical rigs do take a lot of time. So I'm going to treat this more like we're thinking about a wind-up toy, not specifically like that Lego thing. And I'm trying to think of exactly what the mechanism looks like. So essentially, the entire thing is there's a single motor. There's going to be a single motor, and eventually you get to the point where you've got a cylinder, and then I will make a duplicate of cylinder, inside of the cylinder. So like eventually the only thing that's happening is like this is spinning is the overall effect. Actually, I think I just kind of remembered what the movement is. So yeah, you get that spinning. And how basic of a thing can we make here? I'm probably going to use the old simulation system to do this just because I'm slightly more used to it. Let's see what we can do. Also, I still consider the old simulation system a little bit more stable. So, you have to imagine that this is pivoting around an axis of some sort, or maybe there's like a gear that's connecting it to another thing. For now, we're just going to say that, yes, indeed, that this can spin. And it's going to be the single driven part. Now, I think the key of this is there's actually there's these additional two shafts that come out of here. And the other one is, and we have to set both of these to be negative. The other one's on the opposite side. So we get one rotation point, but two different things that are kind of alternating what they're doing. And the next step would be that you get a leg, just eyeballing this, you get like a leg here. And the leg is free to spin on that. And I'm trying to think of a way I could show this without going full simulation. Do we want to go full simulation on it? Well, yeah. Well, here, let me show you the thought is if I, here's a trick. If I put a object into a group, so I just put that cube into a null, Alt G, then it's made a null exactly at the axis point. So let's just say I could call this leg A, and I'll also call this null leg A. I'm going to drop leg A into, it really just has to go into the cylinder. So now both of these things have the exact same axis. But if I say this leg, oh wait, but it's not pivoting from the right spot. So hang on, I got to do this again. So I'm going to put that into a null, and then that null is going to pivot from, nope, I'm doing this wrong again. Let me be meticulous. So this top cylinder, that's a close one. That's going to get this null inside. I'm going to reset the transform. Boom. So that's a pivot location that I care about. So now I'm going to call that leg A. If I make a duplicate of that null outside the rig and then drop this leg inside there, now we can ignore the axis of the actual geometry, and all we have is this null, which is in the exact same place as this null. This null is inside the hierarchy. This one is outside the hierarchy. So now I can grab this leg and right click and add a rigging tag, add a constraint tag, and say, I want to transform the position of that. And I'm going to say that I want the position, but not the rotation. So now what is that linking to? Well, the exact same null, and you should not see anything change. But now if I grab the rotation cylinder, which I'll rename cylinder.rot for rotation, if I spin that on Z, you can now see that that leg is kind of chugging up and down, chug, chug, chug. Now, the cool thing is that motion can be replicated onto the other side. So I'm going to copy and paste leg A, and we'll just rename this leg B, leg B. And honestly, all I have to do is move this null because the other parts are already locked to it and they have to move. So I could drop this over here, put leg B into cylinder B, and just kind of reset that. So those are sort of lined up, and I'll just eyeball that. So those two things are on opposite sides of the single rotating piece. I'll smooth both after, grab this middle one, and if I spin, you can see now we get this walk. Essentially, we're getting this basic walking motion. So this is the principle of what's going on. A single rotating piece now is giving us a very basic walking motion. Now we could, I'm going to wait to see in the chat. There's the original question, which was, is there some procedural motion like this? Do people want me to try and rig this up a little bit more mechanically for real? Or does this kind of cover the concept, and let's move on to a different question? Because I have now done like basic C4D rigging, and we've kind of got this basic motion, and we could build out the rig however we want to there. having it actually be simulated is an entirely different ballgame that we might need to like push and pull and fiddle. So I need, yeah. So somebody let me know if we should spend the time for that, because I'm not married to trying to put that together like all the way. Because like I said, it could take a while. There's a lot of like we need to restrict the movement of these legs mechanically. Because right now it's kind of like gravity's keeping them down, but in real life we'd have to put some sort of limiting motion on them. So I'm just waiting to see any replies to that thing. I know that there's a little bit of a stream delay. And we have to set up like a motor system. We have to build feet on here, make sure the feet aren't colliding with each other. Maybe I would just straight up constrain those. We and then as far as the thing we were seeing, you could think of this as just like they made two of them for that secondary one. So it's like you make two of them and you make sure that both of these core ones are spinning, and then you get these double walker thing going, and then you would interconnect pieces between them. Now here we don't even need to get fancy to make them look like they're interconnected. If I were to just grab, I'll duplicate that leg, duplicate that leg. If I grab these bottom ones, I think it's pretty easy to just stretch that way out, shrink them way down, make that go wider, scoot this backwards, scoot them down. I was able to do both of them at the same time, which was nice. A little bit wider. There we go. Now we got these double legs. They're already properly in the hierarchy where they need to be. So if I grab both of those rotating cylinders and again go to rotate them, double legs. Womp, womp, womp. Well, nobody is voicing an opinion one way or the other on this one. So I'm just going to go with my gut and say that we can move on to another question, because we've now described the principle. Well, okay, and let me tell you the reason I'm not like immediately jumping at the bit to do it is I think we made one of these walking robots in an old stream. Now it'd probably be quite a few years ago, but we did make one of these walking robots, and I think it did work. But I will save this rig to the extent that we did something. Mm-hmm. Okay, and Badger chimed in saying move on, so I'm totally down for that. Abdo, how to force a cloner to redraw without using the vibration tag because it's not working. How to force the cloner to redraw? Well, it's like the cloner should be constantly redrawing all the time. So what is the scenario, Abdo? What is the scenario that's making the cloner not refresh in the first place? Because I do know what you mean, and I can't talk about this in principle, but it's one of those things that's like, it might be a bug in cinema, or it might be you're trying to make a rig do something it's not supposed to even be able to do, but we can kind of trick it or force it to do it. And just to throw it out there for everybody, because typically what I do is I just turn something on and off, but I don't think that's what you're talking about. I think you've got an animation. How do I say this? When I was doing all the Voxel Mesher stuff, there's definitely a bug. There's some sort of refresh bug right now inside of the cloner when it's on multi-instance. And I bet you it's going to be impossible for me to actually break it right now. But if I make this 9 by 9 by 9, you see I've got all these cubes. Now, the refresh bug is when I'm in multi-instance mode. If I drop a sphere in, sometimes, yeah, see, this time it did refresh. I'll yank out the cube and see, these are refreshing, but sometimes it doesn't refresh. And it's just because it's in the multi-instance mode and there's something that's not marking the cloner as dirty, so it's not getting flushed and rebuilt. So, but in order to fix that, I usually just jump off of multi-instance and back onto it, or I just turn on and off the cloner and it forces it to refresh. But, it's like impossible to intentionally break something because it never breaks when other people are watching. Abdo said they have a tracer connecting nulls on a cloner that's put inside another cloner. Okay, let's see if I can make that happen. So I'll just say 2 by 2 by 2, and we'll make that a little bit bigger. And You said nulls. A tracer connecting nulls on a cloner. Nulls on a cloner. Okay, so you're presumably. Okay, let's just start from scratch. Presumably, you've got a null and a sphere or something, and you are cloning these onto something like the surface of the sphere. So now in theory, there's a bunch of nulls on there. And now we can take this cloner and feed a tracer in and then do something like, say, connect all elements. I don't know if it will or not. Yeah, okay, so those are now getting connected. But now the idea would be, okay, you've got all of these things and maybe they're all put into a null, and then that is put into a cloner. And maybe those aren't refreshing. So that's where my head is at. So we'd need to make these move somehow. So like if I were to like change the seed, yeah, they are refreshing right now, but I am changing a parameter. But yeah, what part of this is not refreshing? It's gonna be really, really hard for me to refresh it or to mimic your thing. Um, so I'm gonna put a random on that one, and if I say that this random set to noise, okay, so now those are wiggling, but seemingly not refreshing. But if I were to go over here and yeah, okay, so I think I think I was able to recreate your problem. So now you can see that clearly the nulls are wiggling, but the tracer is not refreshing. And you do see that we've got a pretty wacky rig here. Um, so it's like every time I do something, like turn something on and off, it does trigger a refresh and it goes to the new position. So now that we do have the problem successfully, I'll give it a save. Do you know how much time I have to have spent in cinema to know what you were talking about and be like, okay, I think I can rebuild a buggy file based on a sentence or two from you. Force cloner refresh. Okay, so unfortunately, it kind of goes to like, given this rig, and it doesn't matter if the random's inside or out, it's not properly refreshing. So somewhere in this complicated like cloning a cloner with a tracer, and I guarantee you the tracer is the thing causing the problems here, because it's just not updating. It doesn't know it needs to update, so something's not telling it to update. Now you said you put a jiggle as a way of doing it. My go-to, let me see if this does. Okay, you see if I change this Y position or any of these things, it will trigger a refresh, because essentially it's telling the tracer like, oh, you are marked dirty, like something has updated. So the entire tracer is like, okay, I will rerun again. But right now something's not telling it that's dirty, so we need to trick it and say, well, you're always dirty. So I think actually your solution of the vibrate is a really good idea, because essentially that's a automatic way of doing what my typical workflow would be. And that would just be, I'd probably set my keyframes to be linear. So I'll say Control or Command D, animation, linear, and then just grab this and say keyframe at the time of 0, go to the end, and then keyframe it to some small number like 0.1. So now, given the tracer, we could put in a crazy number in here because the tracer doesn't care its position. But all I've done is keyframe the position, which visually doesn't change anything. Like nothing changes thanks to that. But now, in theory, I have told it that you're constantly marked dirty. So now you can see if I hit play, it is updating. And so this is just something's not getting refreshed properly. I told it to refresh manually with a keyframe. Now you're saying you set it up, which I think is pretty clever. You just put a vibrate tag in there, and I'm going to say update the position. And like I said, like having all I did was keyframe the position, but now you are moving the position around. And this could be the tiniest number. I could say 0.1, you say 0.01, and you see it's still, I mean, maybe. No, okay. If it's not moving at all, it doesn't refresh. So you do need a small number in there. But like I said, it doesn't matter if it's a small number. I could put a ridiculous number there, and visually it doesn't change anything. So yeah, this is a good workflow. Mechanically, it's happening. Oh yeah, you said you put the vibrate on the cloner to do it, but yeah, putting on the tracer, you'll see that there's visually no end result. But I have had to do this type of thing with various rigs in the past. Sometimes like constraint tags and whatnot can run into this exact same problem. So this is the type of solution I would do, is making really keyframing some parameter that can slightly change, force a refresh. So yeah, that's all you need. So yeah, you already had the right solution. You just had the vibrate tag on the wrong object. Refresh. So it's kind of like a before and after. Cool. We've got exactly a half hour. We are punching our way through these really nicely, which I like. I'm scrolling back up. If anybody had a question that I didn't get to, feel free to repost it. But right now, I'm kind of scrolling back up through things. Sakal, I can never pronounce your name, and I won't remember. I can't remember people's names in real life, and I can remember how to pronounce people's what do you call it? Not avatar, but your handle. One sec. I think I forgot my water downstairs. Just checking for new questions if anybody posts a new one. But somebody had a typed out question up here saying, I want the birth of particles to initiate a sound. Oof, that's non-trivial. And there's a little bit of a problem. And that is that you guys are not going to hear. I guess I could turn the audio up, so maybe it'll go through the microphone. But like I'm piping only the visuals from one computer to the other, not the audio. So keep that in mind. But I'm trying to think of how I could even do that. Scroll. So is this even possible? There are some worries. Well, the only thought I have in mind right now, and it's not a great thought, but we'd have to use Xpresso, hopefully a relatively simple rig. The question goes to, is the emitter capable of being read in any way by the Xpresso? So right now I am emitting a particle every once in a while. So not too often. Actually, that is pretty often. So 1 per second now. So bing, bing, bing. Okay, cool. Now we've got our particle group. I'm going to right click on the particle group and say programming tags Xpresso. If I drag the particle group inside, what information do we get? Not many. There's nothing. I see nothing to key off of. Now, that's not necessarily a dead end. Now, here's the problem. Like, before we even go any further, the limit here is every time the particle count increases, if we get this working, every time the particle count increases, we would be able to do it. But let's say you created 2 particles at the same time, this wouldn't know to make 2 sound effects. And if you say fired a particle and that particle died, and then we made another particle, it wouldn't necessarily know to do that. Although I think we could compensate for that. But there are distinct limitations here. But here's what I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to search for the word point. And there is something called the point. It's just called point. But essentially, this is point data. So I'm going to output the object into the point data. And we have to see if Xpresso can read the point counts of this as if it was a piece of geometry. So we will make a text object and we'll pipe the text into here. And then I'll say text object, you with your text spline are going to be output the point count. Ooh, look at that. It looks like it does. It can read it because this particle group is also outputting everything as a point object. So let's double check. So when the first particle comes out, yeah, 1, 2, 3. So, okay, we can get a point count directly from a particle group. Okay, so that's the start. Now, inside of this, we should be able to search for the word sound, and you see there is a sound node. and I actually used this extensively for some of my half-res stuff where I created like weird video games like a flight simulator and a pinball machine and a cube race. And it's a pinball machine, and the video game, I did a lot of stuff with sound effects. So this has something called play, and this play can be triggered. Are we going to need a countdown? We might need a. I haven't done this in a while. Play, I think, is a range of time. Oh wait, there's a. Oh yeah, play. Play's just an on. Sample time. Tricky. Okay, let me think. Okay, first of all, we need to load in a sound effect, and I don't even know if I have one. So give me a sec. I'm going to jump over here and see if I've got like a simple WAV file or little MP3 or something that Cinema can play. I might be able to. No. I thought that we had. Browser, random presentations, Dropbox, inter, comp. I thought that I had a folder with like some preset stuff in there, but I think there's like a song in there. Digital game, sound effects. Okay, I found my sound effects folder. Okay, I'm gonna pop back over. Okay, so here's the sound effects folder from my pinball machine. So what's a good, like, a lot of these sounds are fairly obnoxious. So ball launch, start. Okay, I'm just gonna use the flipper sound and say open. So that should load in, and I don't know if this will work. You can hit play, and actually make sure the audio is turned on my machine. Okay, I'm gonna crank the audio on my machine. And okay, can you hear that? It's very subtle. I might do a different sound effect. We might need something more obnoxious. No, that's gonna be terrible. Extra ball, maybe. Oh, that's obnoxious. I don't want that one. Keep in mind, whatever we hear here, we're gonna be hearing a lot of times. Let's try reset. No, that one's awful. Capture ball. That one might be okay. Okay, not the best. I mean, honestly, it'd be better if we just had like a click or something. Sorry to be particular, but we're gonna be hearing this a bunch. Buzz, blocker. The blocker might be okay. It's a silly sound. Okay, can you hear this sound over my microphone? And then how loud is that? Like, could I make it a little quieter as we're kind of demoing? Because we don't need it any louder than you see. Now, what I want to demonstrate, and I'm going to turn it down a little because we don't need to hear it so loud. In order to make this play in Xpresso, I have to turn on play, and I have to turn it back off again. And if I turn it back on again, it'll play again. So that means we need to activate it, let it stay on for a certain amount of time, and then deactivate it. Twirl, the audio. Well, I'm asking, could you guys hear the sound of that happening? Because it's not coming through the system. You're just hearing it through my microphone because it's a different computer. So that was the question. But anyway, you now see the problem is that we have to activate it and then deactivate it for a certain length of time. So also keep in mind, I'm trying to think of how I guess it was different bumpers did different things. But this means that if it starts playing again, if a particle gets created and there was already a sound effect playing from the particle getting created, it's not going to start again. At the most, if we make a more sophisticated system, at the most, we could say, oh, a new one started, stop the old one and start again. But even that would still require like 2 or 3 frames, which is fast, but it might require like 2 or 3 frames for it to know to deactivate and then reactivate again, because it does need a frame of being off. Having said that, okay, it's not hard, but it's a couple of steps. In the Xpresso tag, really anywhere, but I can say add user data. We're going to add in an integer. Yeah, we'll just do an int. That's fine. I'm going to not clamp it. In fact, actually, we will clamp it. I'll say there's a minimum of 0. And we'll just call this countdown. And this is a frame countdown, okay? Say okay. So what is the idea supposed to be? Well, when okay, we actually talked about a little of this last week, so I can fast forward maybe a bit. But if we search for a history node, or no, it's not history, it's memory. I always mix those up because memory node has a history setting. So I'm going to say the point count, and that's the history input. If the history depth is set to 2, we can give it a history level of 1. So now this memory node is always saying what the count was last refresh, if you recall that from last week. So I'm going to say is, and actually, yeah, we'll make a compare. And I'm going to say is the point count comparing to the memory, is the point count right now larger than the point count last frame, which means it's changed. It's now a higher number. And we'll turn it up initially. So is the first one, the upper number, greater than, yeah, it has to be not greater than and equal, but it has to be greater than. So that's greater. So, and I don't know if you guys did it, but I still remember these as the crocodile, like when you're in school. It's like, wait, the crocodile always wants to eat the bigger number. So here it wants to eat the one that comes before, which would be the first input, which means it's smaller than the second input. So yeah, now we're saying, has the point count increased this particular frame? So here's what's interesting. If it has increased this frame, I am going to grab the Xpresso tag itself and then grab that user data we made. So here's a countdown. So on the frame that this is larger, this is now true, I am going to say that there's a constant on that frame. There's a constant that we're setting the countdown to. So I don't know how long we want it to be. It's like, how many frames do we want? So I'm going to say 30 frames. Okay. So countdown is getting set to 30 frames on this condition being true. Okay. So right now we're at 0. And if I click on our Xpresso tag, and I'll pop it out so we can kind of see it, our Xpresso tag, actually it is currently set to 30. I'm going to set it to 0. So now if I hit play, it should stay 0 until the number changed to 1. And now it's at 30. Okay, that's fine. So now I'm going to make a different copy of this, essentially. I'm going to grab this entire 3 copies and hold down Control, duplicate it. I need the same inputs. So I'm going to say, or actually, I don't need this one, because now I'm going to make another another Boolean operation. I'm going to make a not. So this is an inverter, essentially. I'm going to say, like, this is true at certain times. So I'm going to say, well, when you're true, this is outputting false. When you're false, this is outputting true. So pretty much I'm saying, like, do the opposite. So I'm going to say, do the opposite. When it's the opposite, so essentially when it hasn't updated, I'm going to say, okay, the countdown. So that's the condition when it's running. And I'm going to say, when this is happening, I want to take, I'll keep that constant. I want to take a copy of the countdown, okay? And we don't need the on, and we don't need the countdown there. But I do need to output the countdown. I'm going to say, okay, take the countdown, and we need to do some math. So here's math. I'm going to say, take the countdown and add, I'll say subtract 1. So on this particular refresh, take whatever the countdown is, subtract 1, and set that to be Well, the countdown. So that in theory means, and I guess maybe we didn't need, oh, I'm subtracting 1 here, but instead I could plug in this constant and say subtract 1. These are like inputs. Okay, so now let's check out if this is working. So well, if I hit play, you see how that number's going down? Oop, and it stopped going down. Interesting. On this not getting the countdown, that's super weird. Oh, I accidentally broke the connection of the memory node. I don't even know how that happened. Okay, I'll reconnect those. Okay, cool. Now you see I got this countdown, and now it's jumping to 30 every time there's a new particle, and it's counting down to 0. And then with a new particle, it jumps back up to 30, and then it counts down to 0. We've created this feedback loop and a mechanism for refreshing it. Okay, so now we've got this countdown. We can set this, time to whatever we want. So now I'm going to say we need another compare. So I'm going to say whenever I guess I'll just drag in another fresh one. I'll grab in this Xpresso. I'll say whenever the countdown compares, and I'm going to say when the countdown equals not 0. So when it does not equal 0, what should happen? Well, it should play the sound. Oop, okay, there we go. When it's not equal to 0, it should play a sound. Okay, hopefully you can hear that. So let's see, 0. So every time it refreshes, it's triggering the sound. So let's give this a larger break. So I'm going to say the particles. I don't think we put the rate down to something smaller yet. See, how do we do this? I guess I'll say a pulse. So I'm going to say a pulse of 1 particle for 1 frame with a gap of 55 frames, I think. So if I play, we get particle, and then we got audio. And then, okay, so if you can hear the audio, you hear it's not quite playing for long enough. So I'm going to say that the gap is going to be longer. I say every 3 seconds. But now I'm going to say that the countdown timer should be longer. So I'm going to say like 50, because I could hear the audio getting cut off. So let's hear. So that was enough time for it to pretty much finish the primary sound effect. So that means if a particle is emitted more often than every 50 frames, this particular rig cannot catch it a second time, at least not without triggering, not without cutting off the previous one and resetting. And I don't know if I want to go so far, that far with it, but let's go, and I'm going to say this 15 so you can see it more clearly. I can hit play. Particle gets made. Particle gets made. And now you see every time a particle is made, this rig is not only turning it on, but saying how long it should be on. And that is... So here's, if I wanted to double the resolution of this, and by double the resolution, I want to make it so that I want to be able to handle particles twice as fast. You have to start getting a little bit more clever with your math. So let me save this. Sound per particle Xpresso. Okay, in order to do, well, first of all, I would probably want to organize this more. First of all, the text spline should be deleted. That can trip you up. And then we've got things like these external objects, like this particle group. And so I would probably colorize that, just being organized, especially if you start making these more complicated rigs like what we're doing. So remember, an outside object for me means it's a green object. And then this is the Xpresso tag, which we're referencing several times. That's also an external object. So I'll do that to my standard color, which just means make it purple. That just means tag to me. And then Yeah, it's like, in this case, I might want to be like, oh, I'm going to say that the Xpresso, the audio itself should be like a light blue or something, just to be like, okay, I can always find the sounds and change those if I need to. And then it even goes to these constants could be thought of as controls. So I might make them like a paler green. So it's just like, okay, this is now telling me stuff where it's like, okay, this is an outside object. These are outside tags. These are controls that I might change because they're kind of important. And here's the audio, so I can find that. I don't know that I'm actually going to build this out, but if we wanted it to go twice as often, we need to put more sophisticated conditions here. So this is, I guess it's going to be relatively easy to do. But what I'm going to do is say, this is trying to play a sound every time the particle changes, every time the particle count goes up. But if I say it's a more complicated condition than that, I'm going to say, oh man, this is not as easy. This I thought it would be easier. Essentially, what I want to do is double our resolution by. I guess we do it with a modulo. What I wanted to do is double our resolution by saying, is it even? Is the new particle count even or odd? So then the basic idea would be, I would take the entire rig and duplicate it. Well, what I would do is I would say, hey, this rig has this condition of has the particle count increased. By I would add a second condition here, and both conditions would have to be true. And this condition would say, did the particle count increase, and is the particle count currently odd? And if both of those conditions were true, and actually I don't think I'm going to make it because I think it's even more complicated than that. But if both conditions are true, it would play the sound. And then I would duplicate the entire cluster, the entire thing. So you see now twice as much Xpresso. And I would just invert this condition to pretty much say, is the particle count even? And now this node, essentially this node can play a sound and this node can play a sound, and they can overlap on top of each other. One node can only play once at a time, but two nodes can both be playing independently. So that would double our resolution. Every other particle would be triggering from being even or odd, and you get two sound effects, which means we could spit out particles twice as fast as the length of the audio clip, and that's how much the rig could handle. And we could keep on duplicating it. Now there's making an even number or calculating an even number. There's no node for that. So I would end up having to do this whole thing where I'd have to say, well, can I divide the number and not have a decimal place behind it? Because if you get a 0.5, that means it's an odd number. If you get no remainder, then that means it's even. But even as I think about it, it's like the conditions would probably have to get even more complicated, because when a second particle gets made, the even odd condition would flip. They would suddenly be the opposite condition, which means the other one would cut off. So that would mean, actually, this is just if it's true. So maybe I'm wrong about that, because all we need is a condition to be true for a single frame, and it triggers the countdown. So even if the condition becomes false, it's not re-triggering the countdown. So that actually wouldn't be as hard as I thought. Abdo, when you render an animation, if I say, oops, let me save that. Actually, it's a little dangerous because I got double rigs there. If you want to render your audio, all you have to do is go to your render settings, and when you save, there is output. Where does that hide? I'm going to go to standard renderer and see if there's maybe a difference there. Save. Straight. Oh, yeah, there. Okay, maybe it wasn't Redshift. Boop. Yeah, it's there. Okay, so if we set this to a video format, so if I say this is going to output as like a MP4 or something, you'll see there's a checkbox that says include sound, and then that would render out the sound for you. It would make an audio file for you. So yeah, then you just render it. But you couldn't do it as a series of stills because stills can't store audio. But including sound, if you rendered out this as a actual animation from frame 0 to frame 999, it would render out the sound and it would include it in the video. And of course, you could trick that. You could, if you wanted it to be a separate audio file, you still want to safely render, take 24 hours rendering a giant Redshift animation, you don't want to crash, you could just render out this, pretty much disabling everything. So it's just rendering a black screen, and it would still output like a video file that had audio. Yeah, no, there, and yeah, so I know that's as close as I can get, is that you could do a fast render in Cinema with it, but there's no button to be like export the sound as if it's a standalone sound file. Like that just doesn't exist in Cinema. But yeah, that's as far as you can go. And then the last thought kind of here, which I said, I'm not going to make it and I'm not going to. We see the basic rig here and you see we are making quite a few nodes to make this work. The last thought would be, I said that if we calculated this, checking if it's an even number or an odd number, we've doubled the amount. But there's something called modulo. And modulo essentially is this looping mathematical equation, this mathematical algorithm where, and it is just a node. So I could type in the word mod, or I thought it was called modulo. I don't type in the whole word, do I? Okay, well, I'll right click, Xpresso, calculate. Oh, maybe it's that might just be a mode in the math node now that I think about it. Yeah, okay, it's just a mode in math, so it's a modulo because it's pretty core. So yeah, add, subtract, multiply, divide, and modulo. I love modulo; it's so powerful. You can do so many looping things with it. But essentially, that would return the remainder based on some number. So if we use the modulo in the proper way, we could say, well, only run this. Like we could do like a modulo of 5, and then be like, well, this sound runs if it's equal to every first of the 5 loop, and this one will run every second of the 5 loop, and this one will run every third, fourth, fifth. So then we could put 5 sound nodes going with 5 different conditions, all based on looping around 5. And now we can do 5 particles per length of audio clip. And then the modulo at that point just becomes a number. So you could make it, I suppose you could make the modulo go up to 30. You'd have to make 30 copies of the rig, but now every single frame it would be capable of triggering the next loop of the audio. And they could all overlap on top of each other. And that would be, that's a fairly intense thing. And then I did in the pinball machine, I did end up having to do that for maybe for the flippers, because you could click the flipper buttons really quick, and I wanted you to be able to hear the audio. Yeah, actually, yeah. Hardware preview would probably work there, Abdo. So you could render it out super quick. But yeah, I wanted the flippers to be able to play multiple times, so I did do this type of thing that I moduloted, or I did the even odd thing so that it knew to refresh every single time. Yeah, and the modulo allows you to loop it, so that makes sense. Yeah, that all makes perfect sense to me. It's not trivial. This wasn't hard to do, but you saw there was a lot of very specific logic. So it's not the type of thing I expect your average user to be able to casually put together. But you do see that we just used a lot of those same concepts that we did last week. Like the basic concept of the memory node, like this memory node plus compare is talking about, did something change? And what's cool is we said the point, last time we were talking about did the time change, but this time we're saying did the point count change? But by setting the compare not just to be equal, but by saying greater than, we actually said, did the number change and did it get bigger, which is like kind of another layer of kind of power, and another layer of complication. We're making it more complex there. And then this introduced the concept, this looping concept here, of giving something time and then counting down the time, and just using this not to invert those. But this is where it goes to, all the time you can use Xpresso to solve problems, but it is difficult to explain Xpresso, because essentially you start needing to build this grab bag of tools to know, essentially the erector set pieces. You need to have these tools that is like, oh, I need to trigger something every once in a while based on some condition. It's like, oh, the memory compare node combination. And then it's like, oh, well, now we need these now we need a countdown timer. And it's surprising how many things I do that require a countdown timer. So this is like the smallest possible countdown timer I can think to do, is this simple feedback loop. So once you build up a library of that type of knowledge, you can start applying it to different things. David, this is not from the browser. This is something we just built from scratch. And it is making it so that every time a new particle is created, it plays a sound. So but it's very specific, and we're just going through the logic of it again. But I do think that is going to wrap this one up. Actually, that's perfectly on time for us. So the scene file is saved. Again, all of these scene files that we just made, which is quite a few of them, and we had some really good ones today. All these scene files are going to be available on Patreon in about, hopefully about 2 hours, if everything goes well. And you can go and pop these open and reverse engineer. And this was the most fun and visual one from today, as far as a super duper controllable rig. So very, very pleased with this one. But of course, all the support on Patreon is super duper appreciated. It's a great way of you learning more and helping Rocket Lasso. Like these live streams take, yeah, I know I've been talking for 2 hours straight, which is not nothing, but there's a bunch of prep ahead of time, getting the thumbnails and the posts and spreading the word. And of course, we need everybody to show up for these to happen. But then the exporting and trimming the video and then getting the files uploaded, like this takes up almost all of my Wednesday. So while I'm live streaming, I am essentially giving away 1/5 of my time, my work time. So any support is always deeply appreciated. But anyway, I think we had a good stream. We tackled a bunch of stuff, and I don't think we really got stumped on anything. And I was very pleased that we were able to build that rig, not even needing Ricochet, even though Ricochet would have done some cool stuff for us. But staying entirely in the MoGraph world gave us the power of the color stuff. But I do believe that's going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out, as always. Next week should be a regular stream, or at least a stream, or maybe a guest. I don't know. Don't have that lined up. I've got a trip coming up a little bit after that, but I think next week should be a normal one. But yeah, I think that will wrap this one up. And let's see, I'm trying to find the credits. Yep, there's the button for it. So yeah, that's gonna wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye, everybody.